Good evening. Before we go anywhere tonight, before a single word attempts to reach God, let us be still enough to recognize where we already are. We are not beginning a prayer. We are not entering the presence. We are not attempting to reach the infinite. We are acknowledging that we have never been outside of it. Most of us have been taught that prayer is something we do, that it begins when we speak and ends when we stop. But long before a word is formed, long before a thought arises, there is already an awareness of being, and that awareness is the ground of all true prayer. Be still and know that I am God. Not think, not declare, not affirm. No. Tonight, then, we do not pray to God as though God were distant. We do not attempt to persuade, inform, or move the infinite. Before they call, I will answer. And while they are yet speaking, I will hear. If that is true, and it is, then our speaking has never been the cause of God's action. Our speaking has only been the veil over our hearing. There is a strange comfort that comes when we finally discover that prayer is not a reaching out, but a relaxing in. The human mind has been conditioned to effort, to doing, striving, repeating, and hoping. Yet the Christ teaching does not say, strive and ye shall receive. It does not say, beg and ye shall be heard. It says simply, ask and it shall be given you. Seek and ye shall find. Knock and it shall be opened unto you. And all of that takes place within consciousness, not within speech. So let us begin tonight without asking for anything. Let us resist the temptation to start from need, from lack, from fear, or from a problem that must be solved. For the moment we start from need, we have already accepted separation. And separation has never been the truth of being. I and my Father are one, not shall be, not hope to be, are. Prayer, then, is not an attempt to get God's attention. God has never withdrawn attention from his creation. Prayer is the yielding of our attention away from appearances, away from effects, away from the clamoring voice of human reason, back to that still place where spirit bears witness with our spirit. The kingdom of God is within you, and because it is within, it cannot be reached by motion, by words, or by time. We are not here tonight to improve our prayers. We are here to let prayer cease as an activity and be revealed as a state of consciousness. When prayer becomes a state of being, it no longer begins and ends. It abides, it watches, it listens. And in that listening, something remarkable occurs. The sense of a distant God dissolves, and the presence that was always here becomes evident. The human sense believes prayer must be active. The Christ reveals that prayer is receptive. In quietness and in confidence shall be your strength. Strength does not come from many words. Healing does not come from correct statements. Supply does not come from fervent pleading. These come when the soul rests back into the awareness of divine fullness already established. So tonight we lay aside, even for a little while, the habit of praying for outcomes. We do not ask for healing, for supply, for guidance, or for peace. Not because these are unimportant, but because they are effects, and effects never produce themselves. We turn instead to cause, and cause is not reached by effort. Cause is known by stillness. Let us remember that the Christ did not say, my words will heal you. He said, the words that I speak unto you, they are spirit and they are life. Spirit precedes words, life precedes form. Presence precedes prayer. And when that order is restored in consciousness, prayer ceases to be something we do and becomes something we live. If, as we sit here now, there is even the faintest awareness of peace, of stillness, of presence, however subtle, then prayer has already begun. Not because we started it, but because we stopped interfering with it. And in that recognition, we are prepared to understand what the Master meant when he said, "Ask, and ye shall receive." Now, having settled, if only a little, into this stillness, we are prepared to look more closely at one of the most quoted and yet most misunderstood statements in all of Scripture. Ask, and ye shall receive. It has been repeated so often, and with such confidence, that few have stopped to inquire what the Master actually meant by ask. To the human mind, asking means requesting something we do not have. It implies lack. It implies distance. It implies that somewhere there is a God who has what we need, and here we are without it. And so our asking becomes a form of pleading, sometimes dignified, sometimes desperate, but always rooted in the belief that we are separate from the source of our good. Yet that belief is precisely what prayer is meant to dissolve. The Christ did not teach prayer as a means of informing God. Your Father knoweth what things ye have need of before ye ask him. If God already knows, then our asking cannot be for his benefit. It must be for ours. And if that is so, then asking cannot mean verbal petition. It must mean something far more subtle, far more inward. We have been led to believe that earnest asking will move God to action. But God is not moved. God is not persuaded. God is not convinced. I am the Lord. I change not. And because God does not change, the only thing that can change is our awareness of him. Prayer, then, does not alter God's disposition toward us. It alters our receptivity to what eternally is. Consider this. When you ask for peace, from what standpoint are you asking? Is it not from unrest? When you ask for supply, is it not from a sense of lack? When you ask for healing, is it not from the awareness of disease? And in that very moment, you have affirmed the power of unrest, lack, and disease. You have knelt before them and said, in effect, you are real and I am subject to you. And then we wonder why our prayers feel heavy, why they feel unanswered, why they feel ineffective. The Master never prayed from need. He did not stand before the 5,000 and ask God to create bread. He gave thanks. Why? Because gratitude assumes presence. Gratitude assumes fulfillment. Gratitude rests in the awareness that the source is already functioning. Father, I thank thee that thou hast heard me, and I knew that thou hearest me always, always, not sometimes, not after asking long enough, always. So when the Christ said ask, he was not referring to begging. He was referring to turning within to that moment when the soul inquires, not how do I get, but what is true. That is the asking that receives. The asking that receives is the asking that listens. Speak, Lord, for thy servant heareth. That is prayer. To ask, in the Christ sense, is to question the testimony of the senses. It is to ask, is this appearance the truth of being? And the moment that question is sincerely asked, the answer begins to reveal itself not as words, not as visions, but as a quiet shift in consciousness. Fear loosens. Struggle softens. The weight of personal responsibility begins to lift. And in that inner change, the outer experience follows naturally, inevitably, without strain. We must be very gentle here, because the human mind resists this teaching. It says, if I don't ask, nothing will happen. And yet, experience eventually teaches us that much happens when we stop asking, in the old way. When the child ceases crying and rests in the parent's arms, the need is met not because of the crying, but because of the relationship. Abiding is living in the awareness of oneness. The asking that receives, then, is not voiced. It is a silent consent to truth. It is the inner acknowledgement, I do not know, reveal thyself. And in that humility, true humility, not self-abasement, the door opens. Knock, and it shall be opened. But what is the knock? It is not words. It is the willingness to let go of personal outlining, personal control, personal will. So we begin to see that prayer fails not because God withholds, but because we are asking from the wrong premise. We are asking as mortals trying to become spiritual, rather than as spiritual beings awakening from the dream of mortality. When that reversal takes place, prayer changes its nature entirely. It becomes communion. It becomes recognition. It becomes the silent awareness of presence. And as we move deeper tonight, we shall see why even the most beautiful statements of truth, even the most accurate affirmations, cannot heal until this inner misunderstanding of asking is dissolved. For the truth does not operate through words. The truth operates through consciousness. Ye shall know the truth, and the truth shall make you free. Not say it, not repeat it, know it. Now we come to a point that is often difficult to accept, especially for those who have spent years studying scripture, metaphysics, or spiritual truth. It is this: the truth you know does not heal. And I say that not lightly nor critically, but from long experience in this work. Many have come to prayer armed with truth, beautiful truth, accurate truth, inspired truth. They can quote scripture from Genesis to Revelation. They can recite affirmations with precision. They can declare that God is love, that God is all, that evil has no power, and yet, when faced with sin in a stubborn form, or disease in a threatening form, or lack in a persistent form, they discover sometimes with great shock that none of it seems to work. This is not because truth has failed. Truth never fails. It is because truth has been reduced to statements, and statements, however correct, are not power. The letter killeth, but the spirit giveth life. Truth spoken without realization is letter. Truth memorized without consciousness is letter. Truth declared from the mind, while fear still governs the heart, is letter. You see, truth is not something we use. Truth is something we yield to. The moment we attempt to use truth as a tool to fix, to change, to overcome, we have already stepped back into personal sense. We have assumed that there is a me who must do something with truth in order to get a result. And in that moment, truth is no longer living. It has become mental. The Christ never healed by reciting truth. He healed by abiding in it. I can of mine own self do nothing. That is not a statement of weakness. That is a statement of spiritual law. The moment personal effort ceases, divine action becomes evident. But as long as the mind is busy repeating truths in order to make something happen, The ego is still seated on the throne. Many students come to a place, often after years of sincere practice, where they must admit quietly within themselves, I no longer believe the statements I am giving. They still say them. They still teach them. They still offer them to others. But inwardly, something knows that words are not enough. And this moment, though it feels like failure, is actually grace. It is the beginning of wisdom. For eventually one learns that healing does not occur because we know truth. Healing occurs when we are so still that truth becomes aware of itself within us. And in that moment, something takes place that no words can describe. The presence becomes tangible, not emotionally exciting, not dramatic, but real. And when that presence is felt, even faintly, the work is done. Where the Spirit of the Lord is, there is liberty. Not where the statements are, not where the affirmations are, where the Spirit is. And Spirit is not reached by repetition. Spirit is realized in silence. It is at this point that many discover something humbling. The truths they once spoke with such confidence no longer interest them in the same way. They do not abandon truth, but they stop leaning on it. They stop trying to make it function. They stop handing it out as though it were medicine. Instead, they turn inward, quietly, and wait. And waiting, in this sense, is not passivity. It is alert receptivity. Do you remember Elijah? God was not in the wind, nor in the earthquake, nor in the fire, but in the still small voice. That voice is never heard by a mind busy declaring truth. It is heard only when the mind has yielded its authority. So, when we say that truth statements fail, we do not mean they are false. We mean they are incomplete when separated from consciousness. Truth must be lived, not spoken. And lived truth often expresses itself without words at all. There comes a time in this work when you will no longer rush to answer a call for help with statements. You will no longer feel compelled to explain, to reassure, to quote. Instead, you will turn inward sometimes for a brief moment, sometimes longer, and you will rest until you feel the shift, until the presence is felt. And when that presence is felt, you will know that nothing further is required. It is finished. Not because the problem was fixed, but because the sense of separation that produced the problem has dissolved, if only temporarily. And that is enough. For when cause is touched, effect must follow. This is why the Master said, "When ye pray, believe that ye receive, and ye shall have." Believe does not mean convince yourself. Believe means abide in the awareness of what is already true. And awareness cannot be forced. It dawns. It reveals itself. It comes when the mind stops trying to control the outcome. And so we are being gently led, always gently, away from prayer as effort and into prayer as recognition. Away from speaking truth and into being still enough to let truth speak itself within us. Now we are ready to come to that point which cannot truly be taught and yet must somehow be indicated. It is what I have often called the silent switch, the moment when prayer ceases to be asking and becomes knowing. And I must tell you at the outset, this switch cannot be thrown by willpower. It is not a technique. It is not something you do. It happens when something in you is finally willing to stop doing. Most prayer remains ineffective because it never leaves the realm of mental activity. Even when we stop speaking aloud, the mind continues to speak silently, to argue, to remind, to repeat, to affirm, to reassure itself. But there comes a moment, sometimes unexpectedly, when all of that subsides, the mind grows quiet, not because it has been silenced, but because it has been satisfied. It has reached the end of itself. It is in that moment that prayer changes its nature. Up to that point, prayer has been directed toward God. After that point, prayer becomes an awareness of God. And the difference is as great as the difference between searching for the sun and standing in its warmth. The Master never described this moment directly, but he pointed to it again and again. Take no thought. Be not anxious. Why take ye thought for the morrow? These are not moral instructions. They are descriptions of consciousness. They describe the state in which prayer has already been answered, not because something has happened outwardly, but because something has happened inwardly. The silent switch is thrown when desire relaxes, not when desire is denied, but when it no longer feels urgent. When the soul says, not defiantly, not bravely, but simply, I am willing to let God be God. And in that willingness, the burden of personal responsibility begins to lift. Cast thy burden upon the Lord, and he shall sustain thee. Not later, not eventually. Now, at first, this shift may be very subtle. There may be no emotion attached to it, no sense of triumph, no immediate evidence. But there is a quietness, a stillness that was not there before. And in that stillness, something within you knows that the prayer has been heard, not because you believe it will be answered, but because the need to believe has vanished. This is why silence is so essential in prayer, not as a discipline, but as a revelation. Silence is not something we practice. It is something we enter when thought has completed its work. In returning and rest shall ye be saved. In quietness and confidence shall be your strength. Confidence does not come from assurances. It comes from contact. When this silent switch occurs, you are no longer trying to reach God. You are aware that God is present. You are no longer asking for guidance. You are listening. You are no longer pleading for healing. You are resting in wholeness. And this resting is not passive. It is alive, alert, aware. Many mistake this moment and hurry past it. They feel the quiet and think, now I must say something correct. And so they break the silence with words. But the words are unnecessary now. The prayer has moved beyond language. The Spirit itself maketh intercession for us, with groanings which cannot be uttered. That intercession does not take place in speech. It takes place in being. This is the point at which prayer ceases to be personal. It is no longer your prayer. It is prayer praying itself through you. And that is why it carries power, not because you are doing it rightly, but because you are no longer doing it at all. In this silent knowing, there is no sense of time, no waiting, no wondering when. The question, how will this happen, does not arise, because the mind that asks such questions has been gently laid aside. With God, all things are possible. And when you are aware of God, the impossible no longer presents itself as a problem. It is important to understand that this knowing is not permanent, at least not at first. One may enter it for a moment, then lose it. Enter again, then fall back into thought. That is natural. We are learning a new way of being, but every time this switch is touched, even briefly, something in consciousness is forever changed. The soul remembers, and eventually it learns to abide. This is what the Master meant when he said, Ask, and ye shall receive. Ask not with words, not with desire, not with fear, but with the willingness to stop asking. And in that paradox, receiving becomes inevitable. Now we come to a place where words must be used carefully, because what is about to unfold is not instruction in the usual sense. It is not explanation. It is an invitation not to do something, but to be something. And if at any moment you find that words are no longer necessary, let them fall away. They have served their purpose. Let us not ask God for anything now. Let us not even ask to feel his presence. The desire to feel is still desire. Instead, let us acknowledge quietly, gently, that presence already is. Whither shall I go from thy spirit? Or whither shall I flee from thy presence? If there is nowhere to flee, then there is nowhere to go. We are here. Do not try to become still. Simply notice that beneath the movement of thought, there is already a stillness. Thought rises and falls, but something remains. That something is not personal. It has no name. Yet it is aware. I am that I am. Not was, not will be, am. If a problem comes to mind, and it may, do not push it away. Do not take it up either. Let it stand just as it is, without judgment. And then, without effort, recognize this. The problem is known, and whatever knows it cannot be limited by it. The light shineth in darkness, and the darkness comprehended it not. Light does not struggle with darkness. It simply is. We are not going to deny appearances. Denial is still resistance. We are going to rest above them. Set your affection on things above, not on things on the earth. This is not a turning away from life. It is a turning toward reality. The earth sense reports need. The spirit sense reveals fullness. Now, very gently, let even the desire for an answer dissolve. Answers belong to questions, and we are moving beyond questioning into knowing. If there is a sense of waiting, let it be. Waiting here is not impatience. It is expectancy without tension. They that wait upon the Lord shall renew their strength, not by effort, by waiting. In this awareness, there is no prayer being said, yet prayer is taking place. There is no petition being offered, yet the soul is being fed. This is what the Master meant when he withdrew alone to pray. He did not go to speak. He went to listen. And in listening, he heard what no words could convey. If you notice a softening within, perhaps a release, perhaps a quiet assurance, do not grasp it. Grasping belongs to the mind. Let it pass through you as light passes through a window. The window does not hold the light. It allows it. Not I, but Christ. At this point, you may become aware that nothing is required of you. And this realization may be unfamiliar, even unsettling. The human mind has been trained to believe that something must always be done. But Spirit works when we cease working. Stand still and see the salvation of the Lord. Seeing comes after standing still, not before. There is no need now to name God. Names belong to thought. God is closer than thought. In him we live and move and have our being. You cannot move away from what you live in. You cannot reach toward what you already are. If a sense of peace is present, let it be enough. Do not ask it to deepen. Do not wonder how long it will last. Peace does not belong to time. It is not measured in minutes. It is recognized in the eternal now, and in that recognition, the work is accomplished. This is living prayer, not spoken, not formulated, not directed. It is the soul resting in its source, and from this resting flows everything that appears later as healing, guidance, supply, and harmony. These are not produced. They are revealed. When the Master said, "It is finished," he was not referring to an event. He was acknowledging a state of consciousness in which nothing more was needed. And for this moment, however brief, that same completeness is available here. Remain in this awareness as long as it holds you. And when thought returns, let it return gently. There is no failure in that. Each time you touch this place, it becomes more familiar, and one day you will discover that you no longer leave it so easily. Now, having touched even briefly this place of living prayer, we are able to understand something that once seemed impossible. Receiving does not require effort. In fact, effort is the one thing that prevents receiving. This is not a moral statement, it is a spiritual law. Effort belongs to the personal sense of self, and the personal sense of self is not the receiver of grace. Grace is not earned. Grace is not attracted. Grace is not released by correct technique. By grace are ye saved through faith, and that not of yourselves. It is the gift of God. A gift cannot be earned. The moment you earn it, it is no longer a gift. It is a wage. And grace does not function as wages. We have been taught subtly, persistently, that if we pray hard enough, long enough, sincerely enough, something will happen. But prayer does not bring grace into being. Grace already is. Prayer only removes the obstruction to its recognition. And that obstruction is almost always effort, mental effort, emotional effort, spiritual effort. Effort implies that something is lacking and must be supplied, but grace operates from the standpoint of fullness. My grace is sufficient for thee, not will be, is. Sufficiency is not a future condition. It is a present fact waiting to be acknowledged. When effort drops away, something extraordinary happens. The sense of separation dissolves. And when separation dissolves, receiving is automatic. You do not receive grace in the way a beggar receives alms. You receive grace in the way the body receives breath naturally, continuously, without conscious direction. You do not work to breathe. You stop interfering with breathing. This is why the Master said, "Consider the lilies of the field, how they grow. They toil not, neither do they spin." He did not say they are lazy. He said they are aligned. They are not trying to grow. They are yielding to the law of their being. And because they yield, they flourish. Receiving, then, is not an act. It is a state. It is the state in which the soul has ceased striving to secure its good and has rested back into the awareness that its good is already established in God. The Lord is my shepherd, I shall not want. Want ends not because supply arrives, but because the illusion of lack dissolves. Many students struggle at this point because they fear that without effort, nothing will happen. But observe your own experience. The deepest moments of peace in your life were not produced by effort. They came unannounced. Healing moments often occurred not when you were working hardest, but when you had finally given up. Direction came not while you were analyzing, but while you were quiet. This is not coincidence. It is the nature of spirit. Spirit reveals itself when the personal sense steps aside. Except ye become as little children, ye shall not enter the kingdom of heaven. The child does not calculate how to receive. The child trusts. Trust is not something you do. It is something you stop resisting. In this state of non-effort, the soul is no longer scanning the horizon for results. It is not watching the clock. It is not measuring progress. It has entered the Sabbath, the rest of God. There remaineth therefore a rest to the people of God. That rest is not sleep. It is spiritual repose. From this repose, action may still occur. You may still work, speak, move, decide, but the strain is gone. The sense of personal doership is absent. Action flows instead of being forced. It is God which worketh in you both to will and to do of his good pleasure. And when God works, there is no fatigue. Receiving happens because there is no longer anyone trying to receive. There is only awareness, and awareness does not need to acquire what it already includes. This is why the Master could say, all things that the Father hath are mine, not hoped for, not coming, or when you understand this, prayer is no longer an attempt to bring something into your life. It becomes a recognition of what cannot be absent. And in that recognition, the outer experience rearranges itself not by force, not by command, but by law. So we begin to see that effort was never the solution. It was the barrier. And as effort gently falls away, grace is no longer something we wait for. It is something we live in. Now we must pause here because there is a subtle danger that arises precisely after one has touched this inner place of rest. It is not a dramatic danger. It does not announce itself. It appears quietly, almost innocently, as a thought that says, now let me see if it worked. And in that moment, without realizing it, we step back into asking, this is not failure, it is habit. The human mind has been trained for generations to live under cause and effect, to believe that something must be done to produce something else. And so, even after we have rested in grace, the mind returns and asks, where is the result? When will it show? How will it happen? And these questions, though seemingly harmless, pull us back under the law. The Christ teaching is very clear here. Go and sin no more. This is not a moral injunction. It is a spiritual instruction. To return to fear, to doubt, to anxious watching, is to return to the belief that we live by personal effort and external conditions. It is to sin against grace, not because grace withdraws, but because we withdraw from our awareness of it. You see, the moment we begin to check on our prayer, we have assumed responsibility for its outcome. And the moment we assume responsibility, we have left the Sabbath. Remember the Sabbath day to keep it holy. The Sabbath is not a day on the calendar. It is the state of consciousness in which we cease from our own works and let God be God. This is why so many healings, so many moments of clarity seem to slip away, not because they were unreal, but because we did not remain where they were revealed. We tasted grace, and then we hurried back to the marketplace of thought. We went back tomorrow and worried again. We went back tomorrow and feared again. And in doing so, we placed ourselves once more under the law of cause and effect. The law is relentless, but it is not cruel. It simply reflects our state of consciousness. If we live in fear, fear governs our experience. If we live in grace, grace governs our experience. Choose you this day whom ye will serve. Not whom you will believe in, but whom you will serve. Law or grace, effort or trust, asking or knowing. It is important to understand that grace does not need to be protected by effort. Grace is not fragile, but our awareness of grace can be clouded by returning to old patterns of thought. And so watchfulness is required, not watchfulness over the problem, but watchfulness over consciousness. When a thought arises that says, "What if this doesn't work?" recognize it gently for what it is, a return to the belief that God must be persuaded, that good must be earned, that time must intervene. Do not fight the thought. Fighting gives it power. Simply let it pass and return again and again to the inner acknowledgement. I live by grace. This does not mean that challenges will never appear. They may, but when they do, you will meet them differently. Instead of rushing into prayer to fix them, you will smile quietly and recognize this is the law, but I am not under the law. I am under grace. And in that recognition, the law loses its authority. The danger, then, is not that grace will fail you. Grace never fails. The danger is that you will forget where you have been and assume again that you must do something to make life work. But even forgetting is not fatal. Each time you remember, even briefly, you re-enter the kingdom. The kingdom of heaven is at hand, always at hand, never distant. So do not measure your progress by outer signs. Do not watch the clock. Do not scan the horizon. These are habits of the old consciousness. Instead, cultivate a quiet fidelity to this inner knowing. Return to it often. Rest in it when you remember. And when you forget, forgive yourself and return again. Grace does not demand perfection. It invites awareness. And the more often you remain in this awareness, even for moments at a time, the less compelling the old habit of asking will become. Eventually, you will find that you no longer rush to pray. Prayer will already be there waiting for you. At a certain point in this work, prayer undergoes a transformation so complete that it is no longer recognized as prayer at all. It is no longer something we turn to in moments of crisis or need. It is no longer reserved for morning or evening, for silence or solitude. Prayer becomes the very atmosphere in which life is lived. This is what it means to live prayer as a state of consciousness. When prayer has reached this stage, it is not practiced. It is expressed. One does not pause to pray before acting, because action itself flows from prayer. One does not seek guidance, because guidance is inherent in awareness. One does not ask for protection, because fear has lost its authority. The Lord shall preserve thy going out and thy coming in from this time forth, and even forevermore. Preservation is not an act God performs intermittently. It is the nature of divine life continuously revealed. Living prayer does not withdraw us from the world. It frees us from being governed by it. We still meet circumstances, relationships, responsibilities, but we meet them from a different altitude of consciousness. We are no longer reacting to effects. We are resting in cause, and from cause, effects take their rightful place. In this state, one no longer prays for supply. Supply is recognized as spiritual completeness expressing itself in appropriate form. One no longer prays for healing. Healing is understood as the natural result of resting in wholeness. One no longer prays for direction. Direction is revealed as intuitive knowing, arising without effort. Thine ears shall hear a word behind thee, saying, This is the way, walk ye in it. Notice that this word is not described as loud or dramatic. It is heard behind thee quietly, gently, unmistakably. This is living prayer. It is not sensational. It is dependable. When prayer becomes a state of consciousness, the need to explain diminishes. The need to convince disappears. One does not argue truth. One embodies it. And embodiment speaks more clearly than any declaration. By their fruits ye shall know them. Fruits are not produced by effort. They grow. In this consciousness, even silence becomes articulate. There are moments when nothing is said, and yet everything is known. There are moments when words arise, and they arise without planning. They are not chosen, they are given. Take no thought how or what ye shall speak, for it shall be given you in that same hour, given not constructed. Living prayer also brings a profound gentleness into life. Judgment falls away not because one is trying to be loving, but because separation has lost credibility. You no longer see others as causes of good or evil. You see them as fellow travelers awakening from the same dream. And in that seeing, compassion replaces condemnation. This is why the Master could forgive sins. Not because he overlooked wrongdoing, but because he saw beyond it. He did not treat error as power. He did not resist it. He rose above it. Neither do I condemn thee. Go and sin no more. Condemnation binds. Recognition frees. As prayer becomes continuous, fear finds fewer places to land. Fear feeds on interruption, on moments when consciousness forgets its source. But when awareness remains gently anchored in being, fear has nothing to attach itself to. It passes like a shadow across the ground, leaving no mark. And so life simplifies, not outwardly at first, perhaps, but inwardly, unmistakably. There is less struggle, less mental rehearsal, less anxiety about outcomes. There is more trust, not as a decision, but as a natural state. Trust becomes the default position of the soul. This is what it means to pray without ceasing. It does not mean repeating words endlessly. It means remaining aware, aware of presence, aware of guidance, aware of the ever-available sufficiency of grace. And from that awareness, life unfolds with a quiet intelligence that no personal planning could equal. Prayer then has fulfilled its purpose. It has led us beyond itself into communion so natural that it no longer calls attention to itself. We are not doing prayer anymore. We are living in the consciousness from which prayer arises. And now we come to the place where words naturally begin to withdraw, not because they have failed us, but because they have led us where they cannot go further. Prayer has brought us gently and without effort to the threshold of abiding. And abiding is not something that can be spoken about endlessly. It must be lived. We do not close tonight with a prayer in the usual sense. We do not ask God to go with us, for we have seen that there is nowhere we can go where God is not. Lo, I am with you alway, even unto the end of the world. Not occasionally, not conditionally. Alway, if something has been revealed this evening, even faintly, do not try to hold it. Holding belongs to effort. Let it hold you. Truth does not need to be remembered anxiously. Truth remembers itself. And when consciousness rests In that truth, it unfolds naturally, gently, without strain. You may find that after this, questions still arise, circumstances may still present themselves, life will continue to move, but something fundamental has shifted. You have seen, if only for a moment, that prayer is not a reaching out from emptiness, but a resting in fullness. And once that is seen, it can never be entirely unseen. Do not be concerned if tomorrow the old habit of asking returns. It may. When it does, do not condemn yourself. Simply recognize, quietly, I have been here before. I know another way. And in that recognition, you return not by effort, but by remembrance. This is the covenant that I will make with them. I will put my laws into their hearts, and in their minds will I write them. The heart remembers before the mind understands. We do not leave this place to go back into the world. We discover that the world appears within this place, and because it does, it no longer governs us. We move through it under grace, not under law. We live by awareness, not by anxiety. We abide, not because we are disciplined, but because we have tasted rest. So let this be enough. No resolution is required. No promise must be made. No effort needs to follow. Simply go, as the Master said, in peace. Not to seek peace, but to express it. Peace I leave with you. My peace I give unto you. Not as the world giveth, give I unto you. And because it is not of the world, it does not come and go with circumstances, it abides. Remain where you are for a moment longer, if you wish, or rise and go about your life. In either case, nothing essential changes, for prayer has not ended. It has become your dwelling place.